Welcome to JNN's discussion program on the Frontline. I'm Shane Masters. Now, September 3 has come and gone. That means it has been decided who will form the next government, and it is the Jamaica Labour Party, the JLP, with Prime Minister-designate Dr. Andrew Holness securing a third consecutive term and a historic win for the Jamaica Labour Party, winning 35 of the 63 seats in Parliament. Now, the People's National Party, PNP, led by Mark Golding, secured 28 seats. Now, voter turnout was recorded at just 39.5%, a figure that has sparked conversation about voter engagement. Joining us for this conversation are Head of Market Research Services and veteran pollster Don Anderson and political commentator Lloyd B. Smith. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Good to be on your program.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Now, Don, let's start with you. We saw the crowd, we saw the campaigns, and we got the energy from social media. All of Jamaica was expecting a better turnout. Now, based on your polls leading up to the election, were these results in line what your polls were saying, or was there anything of surprise?
It was a big surprise to not just me, but I'm sure the majority of the people in the country that are tuned into political matters, that the turnout was as low as it was. When we did two polls in August, weeks before the elections, days before the elections, the first poll, 50% of the people said they would go to vote. And then the second one, 55% said they would go to vote. And we even were able to identify which groups were the ones that were particularly keen on voting, the older people, etc. So when we heard the first, when we got the first indication of what the turnout was at about 11 o'clock, we were alarmed. We really were very alarmed. And from then, we didn't think it would get beyond 42%. Well, it didn't get there either. So we are extremely shocked. I must make the point quickly that when we get poll voting intent from the general public, based on our historical experience, we know it's not going to be exactly what it is because some people don't get to vote, some people don't turn out, all kinds of reasons. But we never expected it to get down to under 40%. So it was a shock.
Mr. Smith, was it a shock for you? You are a veteran politician as well on the PNP side. Was this voter turnout, 39.5%, a shock to you as well?
I wouldn't go as far as saying shock, but certainly it came as a surprise because based on all the polling details as well as the overall anticipation, not to mention the energy that emanated from both the JLP and PNP bases, we were expecting, I think the country at large was expecting, a reasonably good turnout. This did not happen. And perhaps one would have to go back into the field to find out why. I suspect there are a multiplicity of reasons. We have heard about people getting frustrated and leaving because they've had to wait too long in lines. We have heard that many persons went with the intention to vote and were frustrated because of other reasons. So it's a mixture. But I do believe, though, that in the final analysis, what emerged is, and I suspect to some extent I may be wrong with this observation, but I do believe that among the younger voters, there's a tendency to follow the political parties to their rallies and get excited with all the theatrics. But when it comes to election day, they are missing in action. And I wouldn't be surprised if part of the reason why we had this low voter turnout, if many of the younger voters just didn't bother to vote for one reason or another.
And that leads to my next question, Mr. Anderson. When you look at voter apathy, are we seeing that more among the younger generation versus the older generation?
Most definitely. This is a topic that we've been looking at for maybe over 15 years. I remember in maybe about 2011 thereabout, we couldn't understand why the 18 to 24-year-olds weren't tuning into the political environment. So we said, let's look at the 15 to 17-year-olds and see where their heads are at. And half of them couldn't spell the word. They weren't keen, they weren't interested, they were not even looking at that political environment. And they've translated and transferred into that 18 to 24 category and 18 to 34 category. That is the least turnout in terms of the age cohorts. And but we were not surprised by that, because consistently when we do our polls, the group that is not going to vote are the 18 to 24-year-olds. You can guarantee that. So there's something needs to be done. I note a very unscientific but very important kind of session was held among some young persons about 2-3 weeks ago. And out of that, they were saying, you guys say we're not voting. It's not that we're not interested, but nobody's appealing to us or saying the right things to us. So that's a very important note that we need to take observation of.
Don, you're a veteran pollster. You've been doing this for years. The Prime Minister, Dr. Andrew Holness, now he's a Prime Minister designate, he publicly expressed no confidence in your polls. Now, here's what he had to say.
Oh, come on. Don Anderson predicted in 2007, 2011. He predicted in 2016, and he predicted in 2020. Come on. I'm not going to discredit any poll. Let me say that. But I don't listen to Don Anderson's poll.
How do you respond to the Prime Minister's criticism about your polls?
There are serious responses, and there are responses that are part of a political game, where you do what you do to gain an advantage. You discredit the pollster to gain an advantage, or you think you can. And that was part and parcel of the whole process. I mean, I didn't take it seriously, because I will tell you that on occasions when I've run into him, he has quietly said to me, "How are we looking?" So, I take that with a pinch of salt. I don't normally respond to these kinds of things. I've seen lots of stuff on social media, 90% of them not true. I don't take it on, because, if you have a political belief and you think you can do anything that you can do to help your party get over the line, they do that. And I think that was part and parcel of the whole process that came out that day. So I kind of shrug my shoulder and move on. I've learned my lesson from very early in the days. Mr. Siaga used to take me to task on radio programs every day when he was in opposition. Take me to task, and people would call me and say, "Why you're not going to respond to Mr. Siaga?" And I said, no, they couldn't understand why. You know why? When he was off the radio, I would get a call from Mr. Siaga to ask me if I have any more information to share. So from time immemorial, I know it's a game that the politicians play, and it's all about discrediting the pollster to look better, especially if your side, based on the poll results, his side isn't coming out on top. So, you take that in stride.
Mr. Smith, how vital are our poll results, our polling for the public and also for the parties?
Well, as has been said many times, a poll is a snapshot, and it can, in a way, to some extent, be persuasive as well as dissuading, depending on which side of the pendulum you're swinging. I do believe that the veracity of Don Anderson polls over the years can still stand up to some amount of, indeed, I would say admiration, because apart from Carl Stone, the reputed and renowned pollster, I haven't come across any other pollster in Jamaica that has been able to give us a reasonably good projection and a sense of what's happening in the society at large. Let us not forget that politics, in the very final analysis, is dynamic.
Yes.
And anything can happen up even on election day to change people's minds, or the day before. Things can just get fluid and go in another direction. It could be the weather, it could be all kinds of things. Even some of it might even be vote buying. But I think when you drill down to what the polls were saying, I think there was some amount of trend there that strongly suggested that the PNP was moving in the right direction. As to what happened, I would want to think that to some extent it had to do with other factors, which perhaps this time around I don't know if Don had sufficiently delved into, such as the candidate selection, because I do believe that some of the candidate selections by the PNP may have done them some injustice in some constituencies, as well as the fact is that there were those MPs on the JLP side who had performed reasonably and indeed creditably, such as the three women who won, Krista Lee, to Hamilton,
Yes.
and the other lady there in Crawford. So, which sort of upset the PNP's apple cart. Because if those three women did not win it, we would have been looking at a different picture altogether. The fact is that they did some amount of work in their constituencies. And this is where now I think, too, that the pollsters perhaps need to begin to look more at local issues and the extent to which they affect voting as against the national issues.
Yes.
Because I do believe that some of the results that came out on September 3 reflected the local politics and not so much the national politics.
Okay, Don.
Shane?
Yes, I'm still hearing you. I
think Don.
Go ahead, Don.
Go ahead, Don.
All right. Thank you very much, first of all, Lloyd B, for the commendations. Let me tell you that anytime we produce a national poll, we would have had about 15 or 20 constituency polls done in between those two. So we have done a considerable number of constituency polls, starting from a year and a half ago, help with candidate selection, candidate performance, candidate favorability, how they stack up against, etc. We've done a considerable number of them. So you're right. We do, in fact, have a blend of constituency and national polls. We do far more constituency polls than national, by the way. All right. Now, as far as polls are concerned, I just want to answer quickly that
Yes.
polls not only represent a snapshot at a point in time, but because we recognize that, we tend to do a number of polls so that we can pick up a trend. So from, say, the parish council elections of last year, we have about 10 national polls, not just a snapshot. So we can understand the trend, and that is what helps us with our estimate or assessment of who is going to win the election. That is how we go about it. But, you're right, Lloyd B, that more and more predicting the outcome of a national election has become hazardous because there are a number of extraneous factors that you can't control as a pollster. There are a number of extraneous factors. You mentioned one, vote buying, problems at the day, rain, people deterred from voting, problems in the system. You could name it. At least 10 different factors that could impact the pattern that a political poll is showing. Now, having said that, we came up in our last poll with a 3.1 percentage advantage for the People's National Party. But note, that was after 5 consecutive declines for the People's National Party in the majority. We were down to less than 1% 2 weeks before we did that last poll.
Yes.
And we saw, therefore, a situation where the trend was favoring the Jamaica Labour Party because it moved from 9% in September 24 down to 1% in August of 2025. So there's something happening there. The PNP picked up. We don't quite know why. Well, we know why, because more of the older persons indicated they were going to come out to vote. The older persons normally support the People's National Party. So that was what we saw in the last poll that we did between the 22nd and the 26th.
All right.
So there are a number of...
All right, Don. Finally, in this segment, Don, tell me, how can we ensure that persons, when they analyze your polls, they don't walk away with the wrong impressions?
Very simply, people walk away with the wrong impressions are people who deliberately want to walk away with the wrong impressions. There's nothing I can do about that. Not that good. If people want to feel because the poll don't favor them, that it's bad and we always get it wrong, I can't do anything about it except, repeat, which I've tried to do, what our track record has been. And I'll tell you that from 2002, when we became really nationally known as a pollster, until 2025, we haven't got one election wrong. Anybody can fact check that. That can be fact checked easily. But there are those who say I've always got it wrong. No, there are those who say I have an intent to make the PNP win. A pollster doesn't have that kind of power. That's kind of ridiculous, and I listen to it. But the people who are, and there's a smear campaign, etc., which you take with a pinch of salt, because everybody says he's always predicting that the JP will lose. Between 2017 and 2022, I never did one political poll, and I did 8 of them that had the PNP within striking distance of the JP. That's there for everybody to see. I had the JP an average of 10 percentage points above the PNP. I had the JP 16 percentage points ahead of the PNP in the 2020 election. Result 49-14. But people see that, put on blinkers over their eyes and put on earplugs and say, man, him get the 2020 wrong.
Yeah.
2020, I had the JP 16 percentage points ahead of the PNP. In 2007, I had the JLP winning 32-28. CVM TV, you can fact check. People say I got that wrong. That was the most painful decision. Portia Simpson Miller has been my dearest friend. I had to call it as I saw it. Portia Simpson lost that election 32-28.
But Don,
What more can I say?
Don, are these polls public, and where can we find them if we need the public, the general public needs to get these results?
Easily available, man. I was on CVTV on the day before the election. That's recorded. I quoted on CVTV 32-28 when I was pushed by Garfield Burford to tell the nation how it would come out. The following night, the JLP won 32-28. That's public knowledge. I can give you a record of all the polls that I have done. But, having said all of that, people look at it and then put on blinkers and say, no, man, him said the JLP was going to lose the election in 2020. What can I do? Show it again and then shut up.
All right, Don.
Unfortunate, but the partisan part of us.
Yeah, understand completely. Thank you so much, Don, for being with us on the front line. And we wish you all the best as you continue to poll, to do your polls for the nation. At this time, we take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Jermaine Barrett, and we'll still be talking with Lloyd B. Smith, political commentator. We'll be right back. Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us here on the Frontline. Now, we've been breaking down the election results, and we continue the discussion now with Executive Director and founder of the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment, JADE, Jermaine Barrett, and political commentator Lloyd B. Smith. Now, Lloyd is rejoining us from the first segment. Now, there were a lot of surprises coming out of the general election. I believe the biggest one is the outcome of Portland East. We have seen on social media where she has been laying carpets in East Portland. Jermaine, we start with you. Your comments on Anne-Marie Vaz, Isaac Buchanan for the September 3 general election.
Yes, I do understand that it has been a surprise for many Jamaicans who have been monitoring these elections, but I confess that it is no surprise to me. There has been a sense of complacency and, dare I say, arrogance on the part of Mrs. Vaz, believing that Isaac Buchanan was no competitor to her. And I think she took him for granted, not recognizing that he had quite a national profile, having defended Vybz Kartel in that rather sensational court case. and ultimately garnered for himself quite a lot of attention nationally and of course within the constituency. I think that would have augured well for him. I think that to a large extent, you shouldn't read too much into the images on social media, the pictures of her, spreading carpet and going around and doing work, because her constituency is a largely rural one, and what rural folks want is a sense of confidence, a sense of connection with their member of parliament. And I think they got more of that evidently with Isaac Buchanan.
Sir Smith?
Well, as I often say, all politics is local. And in this case, there were some very local issues that presented themselves to which Mrs. Vaz did not sufficiently respond in terms of, for example, I understand that there's a serious land issue in the constituency. There is the is it Blue Hole or Blue Lagoon?
Blue Lagoon.
Blue Lagoon, right. And I gather that the fisher folk, for example, and Portland, as you know, especially in Eastern Portland, has a lot of fisher folk, and they had become disenchanted because there was a general feeling that a great deal of land grabbing was going on, and that eventually they would no longer be able to access most of the beaches in their constituency to carry out their fishing exercises. So I think that too played much into what was going on. I noticed that her husband and former, fellow MP
for West Portland.
Darvas, yes, for West Portland, he in an interview recently said that it was not that the PMP won that, but that a large number of Labourites, for whatever reasons best known to them, did not
come out to
vote. They stayed home. I think that is, putting it rather, that is what I call political sophistry at its highest level. The fact is that something went wrong with Mrs. Vaz and her constituents. And it seems to me, as Jermaine has pointed out, that there was in fact a disconnect. There was in fact a taking for granted. One of the aspects of this thing, and to some extent I have to emphasize with Isaac, he was pilloried, a former convicted criminal. How could somebody like that end up in the House of Parliament? And I think his story speaks to redemption.
Yes.
After all, the great United States as a convicted felon as its current president. So I do believe that also getting at him in that way would have created a certain amount of sympathy for him, because especially the younger voters would have identified with him in terms of where he was coming from and where he had reached. Also, his advocacy on behalf of Vibes Cartel. There are many land titling issues, I understand, in the area as dealing with ownership or lack thereof. And I think many of these constituents feel that here's a man who can take our case to court and win those cases. I think that's also part of the overall scenario.
Let's look at something else. And I'll start with you, Mr. Smith. The issue of, or the practice of having what we call safe seats. When you look at Kingston Central, for instance, on the night we saw where Steve McGregor was declared the winner of Kingston Central, then in the official count, we saw where Donovan Williams of the JLP was re-emerged as the MP candidate for that constituency. Is there anything to say that seats are safe, or we should throw that out the window?
We still have in our political culture and landscape not what we call, what are really safe seats, but we call them garrisons. And if we are to be quite frank and honest, there are two very prominent garrisons. There is the Kingston Western, and of course there is the one that is represented by the leader of the opposition, the PNP president. Those have remained, I mean, there's no way that a JLP is going to win in that constituency that Mark Golding represents, nor for that matter, a PNP is going to win against Desmond McKenzie or anybody else put up in that seat. The reality is that over the years, based on certain traditions, based on certain geopolitical, what have you, so there are some seats that remain faithful and loyal and vote blindly for one particular political party, not even so much for the candidate, but for the political party. In that sense, they could be regarded as safe seats, and there's not much we can do about that, because until we perhaps move closer to the one-man, one-vote situation, and we open up these constituencies to greater levels of scrutiny and so on, then not much is going to change. Those seats will remain forever in the column of the respective parties as safe, quote and unquote.
Jermaine?
Yes, Kingston Central would have in former times been considered a safe seat. It would have been controlled by the People's National Party for
especially when you look at Ronald Thwaites.
Absolutely. And here it is that we see since 2020 that calibration has shifted in favor of the Jamaican Labour Party. One of the things that I would want to point to here, though, in relation to Steve McGregor and him being unsuccessful this time around, I think a lot of that has to be attributed to the issues that occasioned him coming into the constituency. You'd have known that the then heir apparent to the PNP throne would have been unceremoniously displaced from that position and replaced by Steve McGregor. One of the things, that happens all the time in the politics. You have people who believe that the position is theirs only to find out that they are displaced. It's not unusual, but what was somewhat unusual this time around is that the then, you could almost say, former would-be candidate and Steve McGregor did not take tea thereafter. There's usually a process of bringing the warring factions together under the broad banner of unity, for the greater good of the party's victory. But that never happened. And I think a lot of PNP supporters, loyalists, would have been displeased. Many of them possibly stayed home, didn't go to vote. A few of them may have flipped their vote in favor of the JLP as a means of sort of punishing or retribution for the party having robbed their candidate of the position. So a lot of that only goes to benefit, and we see it here with a victory of 79 votes in favor of Donovan Williams. It is clear that that would have been a significant factor this time around.
Let's move the conversation a little bit further. We're seeing where a number of women are now coming into politics and into Parliament for the next season. Your views on more women in politics overall, Jermaine?
I think it's a good thing. Jamaica still remains a deeply patriarchal society. And so the more evidence we have of women leading and women doing well, it really pushes against that popular narrative that a woman's role is in the house, being the baby-making machine, tending to familiar issues. And so one woman, for example, I want to just highlight here is Rhoda Moy Crawford from Central Manchester. She was really, really targeted by the People's National Party. Because for them, the loss of 2020 is embodied in her victory. And so there's a focused attention, she having displaced the then Member of Parliament, Peter Bunting, a titan in the PNP politics and politics at large, and now her going up against the mayor for the parish meant that there was a lot of armaments and weaponry brought to bear against her. But what it does reflect in my mind is that politics is not just about pulling out the bases, but politics is also about performance. And I think to a large extent she performed, she demonstrated love and attention to the issues of the people of her constituency. And I think she has now been rewarded for that.
Lloyd B?
I think women in Jamaican politics is going in the right direction. Last time around, we actually had, I think, 18. We now have 19. Apart from, and we don't want to sound sexist here, because ever so often, even this previous campaign, some of the male candidates took pot shots at some of the female candidates in terms of their physique and what have you, which was rather sexist and not very in very good taste, because it was somewhat demeaning. But the fact is that women in our politics is a very, very important ingredient, because it brings to the fore emotional intelligence, it brings to the fore empathy, and one hopes that these women sometimes should even, dare I say, cut across party lines and unite around certain issues, pressing issues, such as domestic violence, for example, which should cut across party lines. It should be encouraging to see if these women are bold enough to go in that direction, as against our men who tend to be, the machismo and everybody wants to beat their chest. But I think our women should bring a certain level of more decency and more calm and as I said, emotional intelligence to the parliament. And I'm looking forward to seeing how they perform this time round, not just sitting there and being decorative, but really getting involved and standing up to the men who tend to feel that, it's their game and they are just there as window dressing.
Yeah. If I may add as well, quickly.
Go ahead.
What we're in politics now is more than simply giving women a token seat at the decision making. When you look, for example, finance minister, the education minister, the minister of constitutional affairs, and several other
foreign affairs
ministers,
and
foreign affairs, Kamina Johnson-Smith, are women. And even when you look at the leaders of the campaign just ended, many of them are women. Yes, we think about Babsy Grange. And so we're seeing a sort of a new dynamic in the politics where women are not just there numerically, as one could say, well, from 18 to 19, that's not a significant jump, but one also has to appreciate qualitatively the contribution of women in the overall political administration of the country. And they are stepping up in a large way.
Now, moving on to campaign promises, from your perspective, what policy shifts or priorities should we expect from the government coming out of this election? We go with Jermaine.
Yes, I think the major conversations of late, near the end of the campaign period, the matter of the tax, the income tax, reduction, the matter of minimum wage increase, doubling that over 5 years rather. Those are big issues that captivated public discourse.
Yes.
And have placed the government in a position where the government must respond decisively and positively in answering those demands. I think those are issues on which the people would have placed a vote in support of the government's arrangement. I think also Lloyd, we spoke about it earlier on, land issues, housing, cost of living, all of those issues. And I could go on, but these are issues that are front and center in the consciousness of Jamaican electorate and must be attended to with vim, vigor, and vitality in terms of, building confidence. And the final point I'll make here is this. The urgency of the administration to respond and to address these issues is made glaring by virtue of the low voter turnout. And I suspect we're going to talk about that a little later. But any resolution to that issue, even if it is that you say, well, the voters list is bloated and so forth, and it wasn't really 38 or 39% thereabout, but it's a greater number. Irrespective, even a clean voters list reflects a high degree of political apathy, which is a reflection of Jamaicans at large not being convinced that politicians and politics is calibrated in their interest.
Lloyd B. Well, most of what Jermaine said falls in line with my own thinking. I just want to add a few.
Yes.
One is we must not overlook the fact that our members of parliament, for the most part, have been underperforming. And the Prime Minister himself has also hinted at this from time to time, that especially in the lower house, one is not getting value for money. I mean, these guys and dolls got big, whopping salary increases. Are we getting value for money? Is the Jamaican people getting value for money? There's a big resounding no. Absenteeism, not only in attending parliament, but also missing in action in their respective constituencies. That has to change. And the Prime Minister, being the first among equals, must lead that charge. What is going to be interesting this time around, and perhaps the current results have helped to galvanize that forward, and that is now that the PMP has 28 seats, it becomes a formidable opposition.
Yes.
And so it's not going to be business as usual. The government will be kept on its toes, and this is going to mean that members of parliament will have to show more to defend their side, especially when there are certain legislative matters that come to the fore where voting is going to take place and so on and so forth. So I think that is a plus for us at this stage. Constitutional reform has to be put on the front burner this time around. It cannot be ignored, and it cannot be sort of played around. It is a critical aspect leading towards better governance and so on. And overall, I think the Prime Minister, there has to come a time when we deal with the big elephant in the room, which is corruption.
Yes.
The PMP sought to use that as its major framing of the Prime Minister, talking about his alleged 28 bank accounts, which he denies, and the kerfuffle that continues with him and the Integrity Commission. All of that needs to be sorted out. And also, critically, what will be the future of the Integrity Commission? I haven't heard much about that, but the fact is that right now the Integrity Commission is an endangered species based on how the previous government behaved towards it. Will we see a further denigration of it, or will it be sufficiently bolstered and made to carry out its functions in an environment where corruption is still looming large?
All right, thank you, Lloyd B. Smith. We are now at wrapping up stage, but Jermaine, I give you about 30 seconds to tell me. You had mentioned voter apathy. How do we deal with voter apathy, especially among our younger people? 30 seconds.
One word: performance. Politicians have got to perform. We have to get out of this state of malaise and sort of just treating the people and the people's business with, quite frankly, contempt. Yes, until Jamaicans recognize that politicians and politics exist to serve them and to benefit them, people won't waste the time to go out and vote, and that's quite frankly the fact.
All right, thank you, Jermaine, and thank you, Lloyd B. Smith. That wraps up On the front line, a big thank you to our guests, Don Anderson, veteran pollster and head of Market Research Limited, political commentator Lloyd B. Smith, for sharing their insights, and also to Jermaine Barrett from Jade. And to all of you for joining us and sharing your thoughts online. We hope you found the conversation informative and engaging. Stay tuned for more updates and discussions right here. Until next time, I'm Machine Masters.